wonders of the modern age surround and give meaning to our very lives. But with the marvels of science and technology came the machinery of war. It's difficult to judge whether we live in a far safer world or a far more dangerous one. In these uncertain times, the people of Eurasia and the United States have learned that dialogue has a power all its own. There's a place where top scholars and policymakers from Russia, Ukraine, and around the world can meet with their American counterparts. It's the Woodrow Wilson Center and its Kennan Institute, dedicated to finding that common ground.
I think what makes us unique is really the founding vision of George Kennan, who very strongly felt that you couldn't just understand the Soviet Union or Russia through political processes or economic processes or military development, that discussion had to be embedded in a broad understanding of what Russia is, almost in civilizational terms.
The Kennan Institute in Washington, D.C., one of the most distinguished programs within the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars.
Like Woodrow Wilson, George Kennan is both a scholar and a policy maker, an historian and a maker of history. The example of their lives forms the core of the mission for the Wilson Center and the Kennan Institute.
The mission of the Kennan Institute is perhaps best described by its three founding members.
One of the fundamental objectives was to have an institution that was really independent in its ideas and its research, that was not owned by any faction or group, but simply spoke to everyone and at the highest and most fundamental level.
Real scholars had a chance to meet real politicians. People with a humanistic perspective could interact with the public policy industry in Washington and give it something they didn't have.
Some of us felt that without a national center of concern for Russian studies, that what needed to happen would not happen.
To trace the roots of this unique institution, one must go beyond the well-documented life of Ambassador George F. Kennan to those of his ancestors, a hardy Midwest clan originally from Scotland. It was a distant relative, George Kennan the Elder, for whom the institute is named. It was this predecessor who in 1864 made the first of many journeys to Eastern Russia as an engineer, and later as a journalist. He was widely considered a leading authority on that region of the world. The younger Kennan not only shared his name, but his love for adventure and a passion for Russia. By age 22, a graduate of Princeton, George Kennan joined the Foreign Service and saw several postings in Northern Europe. A few years later, he joined the State Department's Division of Eastern European Affairs, mastered 7 languages, and began to build a reputation as a top diplomat in the Soviet Union. Shortly after the Second World War, Kennan authored 2 legendary policy writings describing Soviet political and military motivations from his unique perspective. These writings triggered intense reaction from all quarters and influenced Cold War policies for decades. Kennan would go on to author 17 books, 2 of which received Pulitzer Prizes.
One of many reasons that George Kennan's legacy will be lasting is that he is, of course, a superb writer. He is a master of the English language, and he has left a body of written work that will be on the shelves of anybody who cares not just about Russia and the Soviet Union in that period of history, but about American foreign policy. And his writing will continue to be appreciated, I think, for a very long time to come for the way in which it allows us to watch a very, very fine mind at work grappling with some of the great issues of our era.
After ambassadorships to the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia, George Kennan took up residence at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. By the 1970s, the need was growing for an institute to dedicate itself exclusively to U.S.-Soviet issues.
Well, if we turn the clock back to 1974, there were two developments that led to the Kennan Institute. The first was the lingering divorce between academia and the government following Vietnam. And the second was a decline in funding and support for Soviet studies.
From the start, this small but vital body made a big impact.
Kennan Institute in its early years opened the hundreds of institutes of the then Soviet Academy of Sciences that are situated outside of Moscow, opened them for the first time to serious Western contact. Kennan Institute did this.
What we did at the Kennan Institute, I think in the 70s, during a very difficult period, and in the early 80s, was to bring a different dimension on the study of the Soviet Union.
The Kennan Institute became the place where specialists who studied the Soviet Union and policymakers could meet, exchange ideas, and influence public policy. The fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union made the Kennan Institute's mission more relevant and prescient.
You will see the traces of a perspective that saw the end of the Soviet Union at a time when everybody else was talking about how immutable the system was.
But from chaos came opportunity.
Without question, the biggest challenge occurred as the Soviet Union was collapsing, and it became possible for the first time to integrate scholars from throughout the Soviet Union and then from Russia and Ukraine and other states into our program in a meaningful way.
The current climate between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States may be the most challenging in a generation. But where others see doors closing, the people here continue to seek new avenues of collaboration. Since its doors opened in 1974, the Kennan Institute has hosted nearly 1,500 scholars from around the world, opened offices in Moscow and Kiev, and presented countless programs that celebrate the deep bonds between cultures.
We have a very broad scope of activities that include theater, literature, music, as well as high international relations. And I think that's what makes us different from many, many other institutions in the field.
Important findings continue to flow from the Institute, sparking new debates and fresh perspectives on some of the world's most pressing issues.
One of the distinctive aspects of this institution is that it has always encouraged scholars to write for a general educated audience. And that's much more important today than it was a generation ago.
With the annual Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis dinners, national leaders are celebrated for their ability to build bridges of understanding.
It's still going strong after all these years, whether it's the Institute's short-term grant program or its research scholarship program. Interested, top-rate scholars know where to apply.
George Kennan belongs to the future and not to the past.
Our world is changing, and the problems we face are many. But good solutions demand intelligent dialogue and a spirit of collaboration. With the help of the Woodrow Wilson Center and its Kennan Institute, that door is always open.
And I think the real challenges in the future and opportunities in the future are to highlight the ways in which the unique perspectives that emerge from the region we study can inform all of us about the world we live in.